John chapter 11, the famous story of Lazarus. I'm going to read it just all the way through. We won't stop and try to interpret anything. I want you to get the flavor for it, and then we'll go back maybe a couple times and hit a couple sections.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so John chapter 11, verse 1 through 44 is where that story ends. A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. So obviously there's some love going on here. Her brother, godly love. Her brother Lazarus was sick. So the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. We'll have to remember that and come back to it. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago, the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of the world. Who is that? But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he will soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now, you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. We need to remember verse 14 also. It's part of the purpose he's revealing to them. Verse 16, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go to and die with Jesus. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. So that's important too. She's kind of telegraphing, hint, hint, Jesus, Yeah. Right? And so Jesus told her, because he saw exactly what she meant, your brother will rise again. So Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. So here's one of those I am statements. Here I get into teaching. I told you I was just going to read. We'll come back.
You're okay.
We'll come back to that. I'm the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she told him, I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. Then she returned to Mary, and she called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him, and that's another place we need to come back to. So that's 30. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep, so they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. They told him, "Lord, come and see." Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him?" But some said, "This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. And he said, "Roll the stone aside." But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, "Father, thank you for hearing me." And let's come back to that. That's 41. "Thank you for hearing me." And 42. "You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all the people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hand and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." So that was a long passage, but I think it's good because you see this is not just a simple story about a resurrection of a man. Right? There's so much more in here that Jesus is hinting at. He's also responding as a human would respond, a normal human. There's all kinds of stuff. So I know you got stuff already.
Yeah. So, what struck me when we were talking about this earlier was Jesus's response. This deep the anger that he refers to. But it says he didn't find himself angry until he saw them weeping. He saw their response.
Yes.
So when I think about that, you and I have talked before about God in the garden, the Lord in the garden. And, his response, "Where are you?" So when I think of Lazarus' family and the fact that God, Jesus in this case, is looking at them, the ye of little faith comes out for me. That's what screeches in my memory banks, because they didn't believe enough. They're so wrought up in their emotions and their feelings and their whatever, and the Lord was, or Jesus in this case, was responding to their grief and their pain and their confusion and their lack of belief and their lack of faith, but most of all, I believe, the lack of understanding. And while it seems harsh that he may be responding that way in their lack of understanding, but faith would help them understand. Faith would help them walk them through what was happening in the flesh in order to get what was happening in the spirit.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Well, in some ways, there's a couple places in here where statements are made, I think, by Mary and Martha, that if you had been here, you could have kept him from dying. So there is a level of faith.
There is.
But it is limited to
absolutely
what they've seen Jesus do already.
Yeah, his physical presence.
And what they've seen him do already, in the sense that they've never seen him raise somebody from the dead yet. So they think, okay, well, everything's good until somebody dies.
Now, even today, as we sit here in 2021, for whatever reason, we still have this faith. It's limited. And I say faith this way because we say we have faith, but until we exercise it, we don't really know. We can say a lot of things, but until it's tested and until we walk through it, we really don't know what we're capable of with regards to our faith.
Yeah.
So they had an amazing opportunity, and I say that with emphasis because the Lord gives us opportunities for many areas of growth. This was one of them to me.
Yeah. Well, we've come across, and I know we've talked about it recently on some of our recordings, of how God works in people's lives. So you read through the stories of the Bible, the famous ones like Job, Abraham, Moses, and you understand that God sees before he even approaches them and tells them, you're called for a purpose. They're responding to the, gosh, I don't know if I can do that kind of response. Whereas God is responding from this place of, I already see the result. I already see the end.
Trust me.
What I want to happen is going to happen.
Yes.
So all I'm asking is you get on board with me and let me do it, and don't let your lack of faith cause you to stumble.
Well, and we still struggle with this day with getting with the program. Because his concept and his ideas and his will and his opinions, his plan, no matter what we say or do, is going to be made manifest.
Yes.
So if we walk through this knowing that it's already determined that his plan is going to succeed, then why can't we just be happy with his plan? Why do we keep trying to rearrange his plan so it feels good to us?
Well, I tell you, when I just wrote this down, outcomes are for us in order for us to change. That is the part I think we struggle with. So everybody else is focused on, we need to get this guy alive again. We need to get out of our grief. We need to stop feeling the way we feel. And hopefully if there's a person out there going to listen to this that can actually say, well, that's me, because I'm still struggling with all this other stuff going on in my life, and the way it's making me feel takes me out of the game. It takes me out of it. It basically keeps me from living in faith.
Right. Emotions do that all the time.
So if you remember, and again, those people I mentioned, like Moses and Abraham, Job is one of the most common ones that keeps coming back, and that is, why did God test Job? And we talked about this a few weeks ago. And the answer, this is not a rhetorical question, it's a real question, and that is
for
Job to come to a place of faith in his life on who's in charge, who's qualified to be in charge, and that is only God.
Right.
So is this story any different from that?
No. I mean, it says right there that the Lord knows his sheep. He knows his flock. It doesn't matter where we are in the world, the Lord knows us. Just so Jesus was days away, it doesn't matter. He's still very much aware and present. So, I mean, that in itself speaks to his hand on our life and how important we are on an individual basis. So none of us are wandering around in the dark unless we choose to be.
That's right. So if you imagine, so we've got a lot of cast of characters in this story, right? It starts with Jesus talking to the disciples when someone comes and tells him of the sickness of his friend. And by the way, let's take a minute just to say what we know about Lazarus. There's not a lot.
No.
We don't get too much info about him, because I think that might just not be the issue of Lazarus and his character. He's just, in this situation, hate to say it, but he's used by God to make
a point. Well, God still does that.
Yes, he does.
I know you don't like it when I say it, but I'll say it again. I'm God's crash test dummy. He uses me to make a point a lot. And I know you don't like it when I say that, but the way I see it is, he uses people like Job, like Lazarus, like whatever, to display something bigger, a larger plan, a direction. And I have enough faith to withstand it all. I have no problem with that.
Sure.
He's been doing it to me since forever. And it doesn't make me special, but I have faith.
Okay.
And I think that's important, because we don't know about Lazarus. I mean, we don't know if he had faith or not. We don't know. We know Job did. So maybe Lazarus had a ton of faith. Maybe when he walked out, he's like, oh my gosh, you did it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that brings up a ton of questions because we don't know if Lazarus was a believer.
We don't.
We don't know. We know that he was close with his sisters. He was close with Jesus. But Jesus was close to a lot of people who weren't believers.
True enough.
He had friends in both camps, if you will. And so we don't know. And it could have been, let's just go hypothetical for a minute. And that is that Lazarus, if he wasn't a believer, imagine for just a minute, you died 4 days ago. Where have you been for 4 days on human clocks, calendars?
Yeah.
Where have you been? And if he was not a believer,
We talked about this, yeah.
he might have been in a very unpleasant place.
Yeah. I mean, to take a moment, because we talked about this a couple days ago, and imagine the look on his face if he had been in hell for 4 days. I mean, he would have changed everything about his life when he walked out that thing going, okay, I got chance number 2.
Exactly.
And if he was in heaven, as we talked about, or I said to you, I don't know how I feel about it if I was in heaven and came back.
Got your recall notice.
Yeah, I don't know how I would receive that. I might feel a little gypped on that one. So we don't know how he actually felt or responded. But, when it came out, he had to change his life. But it actually changed everybody else's life as well.
So that's the bigger point, but it's fun to dwell on this just for a minute because I had never thought about this before, that 4 days of being dead means you were either in heaven or hell. And either way, you recognize the supernatural level of your life, and that all this time on earth has been experienced on a human fleshly level. And now you're awakened, your whole spirit is awakened to this totally different scheme of things.
All throughout the scriptures, you hear Jesus say, do you believe that I can do this? Do you believe that I can heal? Do you believe? And then again, he says here, you'll see God's glory if you believe. I mean, the belief has to be first and foremost in our lives, period. Beyond all things.
Yeah. So
not emotion.
No.
Not emotion. Belief.
No, and I think the ironclad part of this is that Jesus knew ahead of time. He set it up. This is not just your classic prophetic word given. This is a man God who is telling the disciples what's going to happen. We're going to go there, and don't worry. He's asleep, and they're like, okay, if he's asleep, then he's just fine. Right? No, he's dead.
Right.
And so they're going, okay, so what's good about that? Because when we go there, God's glory will be known. In other words, he's trying to clue them in to the greater plan. It's so far beyond what we can see today. So we may be grieving about things. We may be struggling with the way things are going, why isn't God responding? Why isn't Jesus coming to Bethany to heal Lazarus? Well, maybe because God's glory will be greater if me, all of us, go through what we go through and keep our faith. We can then see God's glory happening in our lives.
That's right. Without
that, we simply have tried to sidestep his plan.
We try to control.
That's right.
So even going back to Moses and the rock, when the Lord said, go sing or speak to the rock, I forget which one. And, he got a little bit hasty, or he's in a bad mood or whatever, and he struck the rock with a staff. God's glory would have been magnified if he would have just spoke or sung to the rock.
Yeah.
But we, as humans, try and control things, going, well, we think we know what the outcome's going to be, so we move according to what we think that's going to be. And the Lord's going, but I got something human so much bigger than that. you think that that's a reasonable response, so you're going to act according to this, but I'm going to show you something else. I want to make something so ridiculously, wildly, I don't know, majestic happen, a miracle happen. But in order to do that, you got to listen to my voice instead of your own.
Yeah.
And so what we tend to do is we focus on what we believe our emotions are driving us towards, and those emotions are driving us towards something that is going to fulfill us in the end if we follow our emotions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if we can set aside those emotions and listen to the Father, then we'll go in the direction that He wants us to go in with the outcome that He designed for us.
Yes.
If we follow our emotions, they'll drive us in a direction that makes us feel good, but it's not necessarily a plan that He had for us. It's what we chose through our own will in rebellion.
Well, as you brought up earlier, Adam and Eve, their response to their own failure to obey God was an emotional one.
They hid.
It was a shameful emotion. We were ashamed of ourselves because we couldn't do that one simple thing that He asked us to do. So they hide. That is all driven by emotion.
That's right.
Don't look at me.
Right.
You know how you feel when you do something bad? It's like, oh, no, I can't have you looking at me because you feel like somebody's looking at you.
Yeah. Well, yesterday, you and I were talking about how emotion drives our physical responses. So we were talking yesterday about driving. And when we're upset or angry or frustrated or whatever, our foots tend to get a little bit heavier on the accelerator.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
So we, no matter how we respond, we're still responding to our emotions. So when people say, I'm not emotional, and yet, they're doing 120 down the highway, that's an emotional response.
Sure. Or you're balling up your fist when somebody makes you mad, and you, whether you do it or not, you want to smash them in the face because of what they're doing. There's a lot of that we suppress, that we push back.
And say we're not emotional.
And we'll say we're not emotional.
Right.
And so, Jesus, and let's stay on this for a while because I want to go to this part in the chapter, let's say between when Jesus shows up. First of all, there's two points. One is He didn't go right into the crowd. Did you notice this? That He stayed off to Himself.
Right.
And He waited for somebody to come to Him. And then He announced it, and then they came to Him. Right? He set this up in such a way where He didn't come in as if I'm here to correct y'all. I'm here to straighten this mess out.
No.
It wasn't, because I don't think He wanted those people to think that this is anything more than I want you to see the glory that I do that reflects on my Father. And then what happens is that one person after the other comes up and says, if you had only been here.
See, throughout the scriptures, you see Jesus waiting until we go to Him. To this day, as we sit here, He's still waiting for us to go to Him.
Yes.
I mean, yes, He will come in, and when something is going wrong and we just don't know how to focus or whatever it is, He comes to us in our dreams and whatever. But now and in this time of the scriptures were written, He waits for us to come to Him. Yes, He chases after the lost one. Yes, He pursues us. But it's a mutual relationship.
Yeah.
We go to Him, He comes to us. We can't, as you said, Him just bulldozing in doesn't make any sense.
No.
But going to Him in humility and going to Him and saying, this is what my heart is trying to feel, convey, make sense out of, that invites Him into the setting.
That's right.
So that's what Jesus is looking for, I believe, in this portion of the scriptures.
Yeah.
He's looking for that invitation.
I would sure love to be in His thought process during that moment when His emotions are starting to rise. In other words, I would love to know what exactly was triggering that response out of Him where He became angry. I know we're theorizing a little bit about what this anger came from, because it doesn't really say Jesus was angry because this or that. It tells you what happens, and then it tells you he had anger. And then it tells you he cried. He cried bitterly, wept. So there had to be kind of this mixture of human emotions
Right.
with godly sorrow. So, and I don't know exactly how that works, but you can imagine if you put those together in the same being, it must be really crazy powerful.
It has to be. But even through this, he did not waver from his plan.
That's right.
Jesus did not waver because of pressure or concern or emotion from anybody. He kept his path. He forged forward in the direction and the trajectory that he knew that he needed to be in.
Very good. So back to a little bit higher level. So this purpose for him being there, we've already mentioned a couple things. It's pretty complex, I think, compared to some of the other miracles we've seen. You know, healing a blind man, you only know that he was blind from birth. Jesus did this or that, and the blind man could see, and he went away. This one, you get it telegraphed ahead of time from Jesus. There was a big plan. It's about getting glory for God. And are these people going to get it? That's what I'm looking at. Are they going to get it? Now, we don't really see the end result of that. The story it stops when he comes out and Jesus tells them to, set him free from all the linens and everything. So we don't get to see how, let's just be hypothetical again for a minute, how these very people, after seeing this miracle, were so encouraged, were so emboldened about Jesus that they went and told all these different people. We do know that the Pharisees ended up on a really, really rocky place because of Jesus healing or bringing Lazarus back to life. This tipped the scale of their hatred for him, their desire to kill him. Because this particular act was so big and it spread so far and wide that Jesus now could no longer hide and withdraw to the country and be by himself anymore, because people wanted to chase after him now. And the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the time were going nuts.
Yeah.
So that was the other part that, Jesus was hinting, my time hasn't come yet. My time hasn't come yet. And now he's doing this act and it fits perfectly. It's got these other purposes, but it also fits perfectly in the timeline where he knows that it's going to build up the motivation to bring him to the cross.
So I want to address something real quick that will probably aggravate a lot of people, but it's kind of what I do. There was a predetermined timeline.
Yeah.
Jesus knew when his timeline was.
Yes.
He knew what was going to happen throughout the course of that timeline. He was bold enough, was it at Mount Precipice, when they were trying to throw him off the cliff, when he just turned and walked through the crowd? The whole crowd was against him, and he's just like, not having it. And he turned around and walked away.
He said, "My time. It's not my time." Yeah.
Yeah. So when you start thinking about the fact that he knew his timeline, and then you think about the other timelines that are already established, and the Lord Jesus knew Lazarus' timeline. He knew he was sleeping.
Yes.
So he wasn't gone. He was not forever unretrievable. He couldn't. He knew that there was something that was going to take place, and he had a timeline for that. So I say that'll probably make a lot of people mad, and the reason I say that is because so much of the Christian community thinks that there's still chance involved in things. There's a little bit of chance.
Randomness.
A little bit of randomness, yeah. The devil got you. The devil took him out. The devil this, the devil. But God is bigger. God God created Lucifer. God has his hand in all things. Therefore, God knows when everybody is going to depart this earth. The Father of the universe has an understanding of everybody's timeline, how do you respond? There would be a totally different reaction. There would be who knows, you might be sitting there waiting for him with, a meal waiting. I don't know. But that had to be a portion of his control, of his anger, I would think.
Yeah.
It had to be, because if you knew the Lord and you knew Jesus and you knew the power and the authority of the God who created the universe, why wouldn't you also have the understanding and the respect for God's ability to determine the timeline? If it was time for Lazarus to leave, at that moment in itself is a moment where God has already determined that was going to happen.
Yeah.
He would allow it. Now, grief is one thing, but if the Lord is saying it's time's up, then why don't we should be going to the celebration of life. Lazarus and his family, at that moment, they had to be kind of in that same area of, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. How do we come back from this? How do we explain this? We're saying that this Jesus is all that in a bag of chips, but then how do we then say he's so wonderful and yet we have a dead body here?
That's right. We hope about some things, but we don't hope about everything. We pick and choose.
Right.
And that seems to be common, is that we want to pick what and I don't mean we as in everybody, but there's, you see it every now and then as people select things you're supposed to be hopeful about. I got a cancer diagnosis, but I'm standing in faith. Sorry, I'm shaking the camera by pounding the table. I'm standing in faith, and devil's not going to get me. I'm not gonna let this take me, and blah blah blah. And it's sort of bravado taking the place of faith.
That's where I was going to go. So we can say a lot of things, but it doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
We can say we have hope, but if it's not attached to belief, then it's nothing. It's
That's right.
Emptiness. I can say I can hope I grow wings in a minute, but I don't have a belief in it because I know something deep inside of me is telling me I'm not going to grow wings.
That's right.
But when I truly believe in something, now I have an anchor. Mm-hmm. And if I have an anchor to that hope, then I can move forward knowing that whatever comes my way, no matter what it feels like, no matter what my emotions are, no matter what the people around me are even saying, like back in Job, there's something inside of me that locks into that anchor that says, I have hope, I have belief, I have a Jesus that I know has never let me down. I have a Lord of the universe that has a timeline that I do not have. Now, with those pieces of information, I can move forward in anything, whether it's death, destruction, pain, anguish, grief, relationship issues, whatever it is, and I can move forward knowing that there is an end to what is happening with me. And then the Lord picks up and says, here, see, this is where you dropped off, but this is where I picked up.
It's back to faith, and that faith can be small faith or it can be an expanded faith. The way God sets it up to expand our faith is read the story of Lazarus. In verse 4, it said, but when Jesus heard about it, they just came and told him that your friend is very sick. When Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were 100% believer in Jesus, right then and there, you'd go, oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we'll just chill here then. Mm-hmm. Right? But all the questions came in, but this, but that, and they're just normal human beings like the rest of us. Mm-hmm. And so all I can say is that when we get to that place where we can accept that Jesus is saying, whatever you're going through will not end in disaster.
That's right.
Will not end in failure. Will not end in missing the whole point.
Even though it might feel like it.
That's right. Even though you feel like it at the time. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's about emotions, but it starts with faith. Back to the example of the disciples in the boat with Jesus asleep. He wanted them to have that faith, just like he's saying it will not end in death. Mm-hmm. So everything we go through, struggle, pain, grief, bad relationships, financial troubles, sickness, the whole 9 yards. If you can sit back and say, Jesus says it will not end in disaster, so I'm going to go with that. I'm going to believe in that. I'm going to live my life that way.
Right.
Which doesn't mean we don't take authority over certain things and take action. It just means that we don't take it on ourselves to then try to fix everything, because the one thing I do know is that when we try to fix things, it ends in disaster for sure.
Absolutely. And we're exhausted.
Yeah, and it just doesn't work, in other words. Yeah. So Jesus was saying this will not end in death. And by the way, this is interesting. If you thought about it, if you really wanted to pick that apart, you go, well, yeah, Lazarus died, didn't he?
Yeah, but not spiritual
death. But not in the end. Mm-hmm. He lived physically again to die a second time.
Right.
So he's one of a few people in history that had 2 deaths physically. Whenever someone in the Bible, you go through all the famous characters in the Bible, and they all got a call from God or from Jesus in a different manner. They all had this call, though. It was like, Moses got his during the burning bush scene, okay, and Moses was blown away by this display of supernatural thing. Abraham actually had conversations with God and could talk with God. Mm-hmm. And it just goes on. Noah heard instructions on how to build the ark, what to do and when to do it, and so on and so forth. And in each of those circumstances, I'm going to bring a common thread for every famous man or woman called by God. God never asked them, and what do you want to get out of this?
You mean he didn't ask our opinion?
No. What do you want? How do you want this to work out?
Right.
And so I'm going to challenge you, if you are spending your time designing your future, if you're spending your time mourning the way things didn't work out because you tried to plan it and it didn't work.
Pity party.
Pity party. It's time to change our way of looking at our relationship with God. Because if you say, I know God, I love God, I love Jesus, Jesus saved me, I accepted his blood on the cross that he did for me, and I'm his child, yet you are in charge of planning your life out, mm-hmm. then I'm going to say Lazarus and every other character in the Bible has a plan already for them, including you and me. Mm-hmm. And if you decide you're going to skip that, I'm going to say, please don't.
Good luck.
I mean, I'm really serious when I say this. I can trust that if you lean on your own understanding, then you will not experience God's plan for your life.
That's right. That's right.
If Jesus had leaned on the understanding of those disciples around him and said, oh, we need to go right away before he dies, then he would have gone and skipped the plan God had for him. And then the glory and all this testimony that came out of it would have been missed.
Agreed. So, bottom line, we can be on God's agenda or we can be on ours. We can be using what the wisdom and discernment that the Lord gives us to follow him, or we can be in our emotions to follow ourselves.
Yes.
We can idolize the Father or we can idolize ourselves.
Yes.
Either way, so we're either choosing God or we're choosing self, and self is not godly.
Yes.
That's bottom line.
Flesh versus spirit, once again.
Absolutely.
We almost always end up in some version of that.